Oregon. He's a principal author and lead trainer of the NCI Charrette System, and I've got to tell you, all architects and planners love charrettes. The first structured approach to design-based collaborative community planning. Since he co-founded NCI in 2001, Bill has trained top staff from various organizations, including the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. General Services Administration, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Fannie Mae Foundation, and Departments of Transportation in Oregon, New York, and Arizona, as well as many private planning firms across the country. And there's more. He co-authored the Charrette Handbook, published by the American Planning Association, is the co-editor and essayist of Towns and Town-Making Principles, a monograph on DPZ, and a contributor to the Charter of the New Urbanism. Bill has taught at various universities, including Harvard, where he received his Master of Architecture in Urban Design, and now annually teaches the NCI Charrette System certificate course. So I'm going to start by asking Bill Lennertz to please come up.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning. I now live in Portland, Oregon for the last 20 years, and I have to say that everything that Chuck talked about this morning is in Portland. And it shows that young people and old people want to come to such a cool place even though it rains a lot. And I've been thinking, wow, they even come because it rains, but the coolness of it. Everything he talks about is there. So if you want to see it in action, just go up the road. I recommend you go in August or September and experience it. I want to thank the authority, I want to thank the university, and I want to thank Victoria and her staff for putting together this great conference. I also have the opportunity to do this while he's here. Peter Katz is a friend of mine and advisor for many years. 20 years ago, I remembered that Peter called me up and said, Bill, you know, we're doing this conference. You should do a lecture on charrettes. And I thought, huh? Who wants to listen to a lecture on charrettes? 20 years later, and 10 years after that, I started the National Charrette Institute, and now I teach courses all over the place on charrettes. So if it hadn't been for Peter doing that, I might not be doing this right here. Peter brings a lot of different people together. Okay, on with it. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes about the NCI Charrette System. Here's a diagram that shows three major parts of community planning. And three major parts you're hearing about here over these 2 days. Three pillars, if you will. One is that you have to have the principles in place, and you've been hearing about the principles of street design, of placemaking, and so forth. And the terms of these principles changes every so often as they become politicized. When I first started, it was neo-traditional town planning. Now it's sustainable design, new urbanism, whatever you want to call it. It's just good principles of planning, like Brian referred to. And then there are the standards, the form-based codes that Stefan will talk about here in a minute. You have to have good standards to really make things turn out the way you want them to. That's what developers build to. And the third part is the process. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about, the people part. Basically, if you don't treat people right, what you want to have happen might not happen. So we're going to talk about column number 3 here today. But first I want to ask you, when was the last time that you spent a whole day working on one thing? No television, no texting, no smartphones, nothing. When was the last time you spent a whole day doing that? How about 2 days? How about 3, 4, 5 days? How about doing it with a group of people? What happens when you do that? Here's an artist. Now, does he have? Is he watching TV over here? Is he multitasking on his computer? Does the artist, does the author, when she writes a book, does she have 5 screens open and tweeting and stuff when she writes her book? No. She goes to the seashore, she unplugs, and she writes. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here today is creative solutions. because everything that these people have been talking about requires creativity. Out-of-the-box work. This is not normal standard procedure. And what happens when you put the world aside and you focus your human creativity and intent on one thing, and then you do that as a team? That's where the magic of charrettes happens in terms of creative solutions. And not only that, it's fun. It's breathtakingly relieving to get rid of all that stuff we deal with all day long and just do one thing. So I'm going to be talking about charrettes, and I thought I'd better clarify the term right now because there probably is no greater misunderstood word than the word charrette. Where I go, I'm constantly trying to reframe that term. Oh yeah, I went to a charrette yesterday. It was in the afternoon. And I went to a charrette last Saturday. And yeah, I went to a charrette. It lasted 5 days. The word is all over the place, so beware of that. And as an institute, we are trying to reframe that term all the time. But you know where it came from? It came from the creative workplace. It came from the schools of Paris, where the professors would make the kids work on a quick solution. Get it done quickly. I'll give you 2 days to get this done. And the kids were up like all night on whatever stimulants they had in Paris in those days. And then the professor sent around a little cart or a charrette to pick up the work of the students and bring it to their review. And the kids supposedly were still on the charrette cart working all the way to the place. And those of you who are architects, you've been there. And artists and writers, you've been on that charrette cart. In fact, when we're up all night wrapping our kids' presents, we're on the cart. You've all been on the charrette cart. It's actually kind of exciting. It's an exciting way to work. And those professors figured that if you give someone a short period of time, they would block out the world and dig into their creative center. They knew that. In fact, I'm reminded of a quote I heard just the other day by Leonard Bernstein, where he said something like, "Great things come from a good plan and not quite enough time." Leonard Bernstein said that. Something about the pressure of time. And so that's part of charrettes too. NCI, by the way, we start out by saying it is a multiple-day event, and I'll talk about how that works in a minute. It includes all the affected parties to create and support a feasible solution, so it works like for Chuck and his ULI gang. Really results in transformative community change. Can really bring massive change to a community. And by the way, one big myth I get from charrettes, oh, we can't do a multiple-day charrette because the people can't come all that time. Well, the way we design it is the people don't have to be there all the time. Okay? That's not a requirement. Now, on to another part of community planning is that, unfortunately, we are agents of change, and people don't like change. It starts when we were little kids. I mean, we like our groove. We like where we are. We just would rather not be bothered. And so we're bringing change to a solution. I'm going to talk about the Zen or the Aikido of charrettes for a minute. And that is the idea that I experienced actually recently with Victor Dover in Michigan for a project we were working on the opportunity of conflict. There is going to be conflict in any community planning project. It's going to happen. Now, you can either try to ignore it, try to dodge it, try to keep it out of the room, hope to get to the finish line before the conflict comes and gets you in the 11th hour, or you can do like these guys. You take the energy of that conflict and you move it to a productive solution. I'll tell you a story. Victor and I were in Michigan. We were working on a charrette. We had a large public meeting, and during that public meeting, people were working at small tables on design ideas. And during that public meeting, one table looked like they were having some trouble. And later on, my staff told me that at this one table, a community leader really didn't like what was going on. In fact, she might not come back. Now, actually, we were lucky. We were lucky because, you know what? And I see a lot of you have been around the track a few times. Every meeting, something goes wrong. I'm sorry, but every meeting, you're going to find somebody who's not quite liking it. Someone might not talk about it. They'll be quiet, but the next day, they talk to the mayor, they tweet, they do something. So we found out about it, luckily. We found out about it quickly. Now, the real key was that we were there the next day. If I had gone home, back to Portland, Oregon, and got a phone call 2 days later that this community member is telling everybody that she doesn't like it, and their group is out, sorry, then you're really behind the 8 ball. But instead, you know what we did? The next day, our team was together in the Charrette studio, and we said, call her up. Call her up, bring her in. She came in that afternoon. She brought all her ideas. She worked with the Charrette team. By 4 o'clock, she was a champion. So that's instead of, okay, let's avoid it, we'll get through it, it's opening up to the possibility of conflict being a creative engine. So that's what Charrettes can do when you're there for more than 1 day. When you're not there for more than 1 day, good luck. Another thing about Charrettes is that we're in a moment in time now, aren't we, when we're figuring out that our problems are so complex that we got to work together. Everywhere I go, I hear this. The only way out of this mess, whatever it is we have to work together. The way that barn raising used to be working together. Now, the problem is that working together, unfortunately, ends up most often in endless meetings. Let's meet, and meet, and meet, and meet, and meet, and meet, and finally, at the end, you get meeting fatigue, and the only people left are the people who always come and doesn't really represent the full community. So collaboration is really what we're looking for. In fact, here's that meeting that I told you about. We're looking to bring communities together, to work together, to design together, to come up with solutions that can work as a win-win. All ages. We work with the schools, too. It's fantastic. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Charrettes so you can get some idea of just how they work. The roles in the Charrette is that there's a Charrette team, and those people are multidisciplinary team members, architects, landscape architects, economists, and so forth. All the viewpoints that need to be there to create a holistic solution to create these communities. Because the only way to create a street like Victor's talking about and a main street that Doug's talking about is to get the different disciplines together. You got to get out of the silos. In fact, the first charrette we did back in 1987 with DPZ was one in which we realized the only way to design this complex thing called smart growth was to bring together the professionals to get them out of their silos. You have to get out of the silos to make it happen. The other people that get involved are stakeholders. And those are people in the community in different levels of participation, and we provide different ways for them to be involved. They can be involved in stakeholder meetings, public meetings, and dropping by our Charrette studio, but they're not there the whole time. The charrette is like a charrette train that moves along, and every so often it stops at a station, and some people get on, and it moves along, design work happens, they get off, on and off. They get on and off at the right points. They are involved in cycles, work cycles. So the first part of a charrette is that there is a community vision meeting. No design has started yet. It's listening. Listening to the community, and then the design team comes up with alternatives. And here's the key. The alternatives are fed back a day or two later to a public meeting, a quick feedback loop. This feedback loop allows people to see the design ideas as they are evolving instead of finalized ideas at the end of the process. So this is where people really get hooked in charrettes. They come to the second meeting and they go, oh my gosh, look at all that work that team has done. A lot of creative work. Some of that works, some of it doesn't. I have questions about that, and people learn. This is where they learn about the complexity of the design problem. And basically, it keeps going. A preferred plan is created, fed back to a feedback loop, down to developing that plan in detail, doing testing on it, and then finally bringing it to the community at the end. This process lasts anywhere between 4, 5, 6, 7 days long. It goes from a cold start to a very detailed solution at the end. Now, the secret ingredients are 3 feedback loops. As designers, 3 feedback loops allows me to get it wrong twice. Think about it. It allows me to, what about this? What about that? It allows us to run ideas by and get it wrong twice. It turns controversy into opportunity by exposing the conflicts and resolving them within days rather than months, rather than these in-between times that I talked about. It develops buy-in and understanding by embedding people in the design process. We bring them into the French design Parisian Charrette studio. We bring them into the creative moment. We hand them pencils. We let them work with us. And as I said before, it heightens creativity through uninterrupted focused work over days. And very importantly for developers and for people with the money, it avoids costly rework through just-in-time information. This process actually that I'm talking to you about is the same process that's used by any world-class industry. You know what they call it though? They'll call it, in fact, I have a friend who works in companies. He says, oh yeah, we call that co-locating cross-functional teams. Any world-class industry, it basically is the Toyota method. It's a team approach with just-in-time information and bringing all the viewpoints in to reduce costly rework. So we're bringing it to this world. Now, another thing that it does is it shortens time. It allows you to get through the design process without endless meetings by combining several meetings into a design event. Okay, I'm looking for the time person. She's not there. I keep waiting for the time thing. I think I got a few more minutes, Victoria. Okay, well, let's talk about weddings, okay? Sure. Why this picture? Well, this came from my experience last year when my sister-in-law was designing her daughter's wedding, and she took an entire year to design this wedding, and I was blown away by this. Now, it was a large wedding, and I said, you know what? That's a little bit like designing a charrette, what she went through. So let's talk about it a little bit. This was not the wedding, by the way. This is off a Google picture, an Italian wedding, but it was a big wedding. So it was a very successful wedding, but it had to do with the fact that Patty really worked hard for a year. First of all, it took her a year to get the right venue. The good venues are taken in a year. So secondly, actually, let me ask you guys, what's the hardest thing about doing weddings? The guy says money, usually. Guest list, right? All those things, logistics, the people part. You see where I'm going here? Is that in any type of design, I don't have a pointer, do I, anybody? In any type of event, a charrette, but in this event, there are 3 circles of participation. Okay, let's draw a circle around those 2 people up front. They're the core team. They're involved in absolutely everything at the wedding. Thanks. The second line is drawn around the first row. That group is involved with almost everything. And then, actually, that group is about row 5, right? That's a family. They're involved with lots of stuff. And then a circle is drawn out here, and they're involved in other things. In fact, this person right here might have only come to the wedding. Just came to the wedding. The secret to Patty's wedding success was that everybody left happy about how they were involved. You've heard of stories where families have feuds that start for years because we weren't invited to that reception. We weren't invited to that meeting, right? So the key in public involvement and in charrettes is figuring out how to orchestrate it so everybody's involved at the right moment in time so they feel good about it. so that they, even though they weren't involved with everything. 3 circles of involvement. So in the NCI process, we identify the 3 circles. But you know who you have to hit in all 3 circles? And this is something to take down. Number 1, decision makers. They have to be in there. Number 2, anybody directly affected by the outcome. Number 3, anybody who can provide valuable information to the product. And then 4, anybody who can support the project. And 5, the ones that we always want to leave out of the equation, the people who might block it. Anybody who's in those 5 categories needs to be brought in to the 3 circles. So, NCI has put together a systems approach to this, knowing that you can't just get away by doing a charrette, dropping in from a helicopter. Just like the wedding, you just can't get by. You need a lot of preparation. So we've created this systems approach that we teach, and I can't do it in the 5 minutes that are left to me, but there's a systems approach. Basically, 6 to 9 months before a charrette, you got to get your people and data in a row. Then you do the charrette, and then you follow up with good implementation. If you want to see a really good example that Peter and I were involved with, and Stefan's boss, Dan Perolik, were involved with, I guess around here, was the Contra Costa Transit Center over at Pleasant Hill BART Station. Go over there and see this thing. It was a wasteland, and in 1 week we created a plan that was adopted by unanimous decision, and now it stands there today as one of the poster childs. This was done in a charrette that no other process could solve. These people were at their throats. It was really contentious. All trust was lost, and this process, with Peter's help and a good supervisor, got us through. So that's just one example. I'm working on one with Victor Dover in Michigan, 21 miles of Michigan Avenue. You can do this thing on many different scales. You can do charrettes for physical planning, for public policy, and in-house charrettes for even security, high-tech military work. You can use charrettes to do lots of different types of work. We have principles of town planning, which you can find of our work, which involve working collaboratively, compressing our work sessions, working in feedback loops, using design. But the big one is the short feedback loop. The short feedback loop, getting to people in a hurry. Just like I talked about the lady who was not happy with the process, who was an important community person, being able to feedback quickly with her, to bring people through a process that's still alive, that's still fresh, that they're a part of. They see the creation of it. Okay, I'll just finish up. That's my really quick summary. I hope to have time to get into the details with you on this and how it might apply to your situation. I think you should do a charrette on this project. I think it would really bring together all sides of the equation, the community, into a feasible solution. Our trainings, by the way, we're teaching them, as Brian talked about, around the country. Our trainings involve people working very actively and happily. And one thing for you folks who are in agency staff, we have a very useful document called a charrette template for RFPs. And you can get it free from our website. It prescribes how to do charrettes for requests for consultant services. So you can get that on our website. We're trying to get that into every library in the country for planners. And our handbook for charrettes will be coming out soon. And I don't have it on here. We're www.charretteinstitute.org. So let Stefan come up, and we'll get to some questions later. Thank you very much.